Good morning, crime community. I'm here to read out another chapter of Poisoner in Chief. I'm in the same chapter. It's called Some of the People Who Were Out of Control in Those Days. The next day, articles about the Rockefeller Commission reported dominated front pages across the United States and beyond. Most of them focused on new revelations about the MH Chaos surveillance program. The Washington Post ran 4 stories. One was headlined, Suicide Revealed. A ringing telephone woke Eric Olson at his apartment near Harvard University, where he was pursuing a graduate degree in psychology. His brother-in-law was calling. "Have you seen today's Washington Post?" he asked. "No, why?" Olson replied. "There's a story in there that you need to read right away. It's about your father." "My father? What about my father?" "Go out and get a copy, then call me back." Olson dressed, jogged out to the out-of-town newsstand in Harvard Square, brought a Post, and saw the headline, Suicide Revealed. A civilian employee of the Department of Army unwittingly took LSD as part of a Central Intelligence test, then jumped 10 floors to his death. Less than a week later, according to the Rockefeller Commission report issued yesterday, the story began. The sentence contained 2 inaccuracies. The victim was a CIA officer, not any Army officer, and his jump was 13 floors, since by the numbering system at the Statler Hotel, room 1018A was on the 13th floor. Nonetheless, Eric Olson had a flash of recognition. "It was amazing," he said years later. "It was truly amazing. An Army scientist, that was the label, an Army scientist was drugged in 1953 with LSD by the CIA, reacted badly, was taken for medical attention to New York, excuse me, but unfortunately jumped out the window. Then you go, drugs, LSD, what?" It was this amazing combination of enlightenment and befuddlement at the time, both about why are drugs now involved in this, but also, is this my father? At the same time, how many scientists were jumping out of windows in New York in 1953? This story, with its lurid mix of drugs, death, and the CIA, proved irresistible. For the next several days, reporters barraged the CIA with demands to know more about the scientist who jumped 10 floors to his death after being dosed with LSD. The Olson family called a press conference on the day before it was to be held. Eric Olson invited the reporter, Seymour Hersh, to the family home in Frederick. Hersh was characteristically blunt. "There must have been most goddamn curious family in the United States," he marveled. "How you could have lived with this bullshit story for 20 years is beyond me." At the press conference held in the family's backyard, Alice Olson read a statement saying that the family had decided to file a lawsuit against the CIA, perhaps within 2 weeks, asking several $1 million in damages. She insisted that her husband had not acted irrationally or sick during the last days of his life and was very melancholy, and said he was going to leave his job. Since 1953, he had struggled to understand Frank Olson's death as an inexplicable suicide, she said. The true nature of his death was concealed for 22 years. Besides announcing plans to sue the CIA, the Olson family was asked the New York Police Department to open a new investigation. Manhattan District Attorney Robert Mogenthau replied immediately, promising that his office would begin looking into certain aspects of the case. The New York Police Commissioner, Michael J. Codd, and his ordered detectives to look at the whole matter as to just what may have been the totality of circumstances under which Mr. Olson died. Several stories about Olson's death quoted Robert Lashbrook, who was with him in room 1018A on the night he died. "I don't really know what I should say or what I shouldn't," Lashbrook told the Washington Post in a telephone interview. When he mentioned that immediately after Olson's death, he had called CIA employee to report that he had happened and that the employee's name was Sidney Gottlieb. On the day of the Post ran that interview, the New York Times also published Gottlieb's name. It described him as chief of the Central Intelligence Agency testing of LSD and quoted unnamed Rockefeller Commission investigators at asserting that he had destroyed the drug program records in 1973 to hide the details of a possibly illegal actions. The Times also said that Gottlieb had been personally involved in a fatal experiment that led to Frank Olson's death. The Rockefeller Commission previously reported the destruction of records on the LSD experiments and did not mention Mr. Gottlieb by name. It also reported a program through the Federal Bureau of Drug Abuse Control in which the CIA had arranged to test LSD on unsuspecting volunteers in two programs, one in the West and the other along the East Coast. Staffer sources in the Rockefeller Commission said this program was also commanded by Dr. Gottlieb. The staff attempted to interview Dr. Gottlieb, was told by the agency that he was unavailable. The New York Times tried unsuccessfully to reach him. Those stories pierced Gottlieb's shroud of anonymity for the first time. He was gone, but to his eternal dismay, not forgotten. Alarm bells went off at the White House after the Olson family announced its plan to sue the CIA. A lawsuit had followed to proceed would give the family, as well as homicide detectives in New York, a tool they could use to force disclosure of deep secrets. President Ford's chief of staff, Donald Rumsfeld, and his deputy, Dick Cheney, recognized the danger. Cheney warned Rumsfeld in a memo that the lawsuit might force the CIA to disclose highly classified national security information. To head off this looming disaster, he recommended that Ford make a public expression of regret and express the willingness to meet personally with Mrs. Olson and her children. Ford took his aide's advice. He invited Alice Olson and her three adult children to the White House. On July 21st, 1975, they met in the Oval Office. It was a unique historical moment, the only time an American president has ever summoned the family of a CIA officer who died violently and apologized on behalf of the United States government. And he never told her that they were murdered by the CIA, and there was a second autopsy that the Olsons did. They found out that their father's head had been slammed in the head before he was pushed. With deepest sincerity and conviction, I hereby extend that apology for the uncertainties and anguished experience by the family over this extended period, Ford said after greeting the Olsons. He said that he had directed the CIA to give them whatever documents it had that might shed light on this case. Later, they met with William Colby at CIA headquarters at Langley. He apologized for what he called a terrible thing that should never have happened. Some of our people were out of control in those days, such the title of the chapter. Colby said they went too far. There were problems of supervision and administration. White House lawyers offered the Olson family $750,000 in exchange for dropping its legal claims. After some hesitation, the family accepted. Congress passed a special bill approving the payment. That would have closed the case if Frank Olson had remained quiet in his grave. After retiring from the CIA, Sidney Gottlieb could hardly have taken a normal job. For 2 decades, he had lived under deep cover. He had conceived and directed a mind control program with global research, overseen extreme interrogations, concocted poisons to kill foreign leaders, and crafted tools of mayhem for spies. What job would follow that? With help from his old friend, Richard Helms, Gottlieb quietly became a consultant of the Drug Enforcement Administration. To get the job, which he designated as sensitive, he had to complete an extended application. He wrote that he was 55 years old, stood 6 feet tall, weighed 175 pounds, had hazel eyes and gray hair, spoke good German and fair French, and had top secret plus many special clearances. In one section of the application, he was asked to summarize what he had done in his previous job. Responsible for a broad program involving research, development, and production of equipment and software in a wide range of scientific and engineering fields, and the deployment and application of those assets worldwide, he wrote, had total responsibilities for management of funds, personnel, and direction of activities. Gottlieb spent 7 months at the Drug Enforcement Administration, most of it preparing for what Its director, John Bartels, called a management study in research facilities. The interlude, which ended in May 74, gave him time to reflect on his future. Quiet retirement was implausible. Gottlieb was still youthful and vigorous. By nature, he was an explorer, a seeker, a wanderer. Government service had not made him rich, but it left him with a home in Virginia, some savings, and a pension of $1,600 per month. His children went out of high school. Both he and his free-thinking wife, Margaret, thirsted for adventure. Together they set out to imagine a new life. The leap they decided to take was unconventional. They saw the least, but utterly consistent with the restless inner spirits. Sid retired from government at an early age and had to decide what to do with the rest of our lives. Margaret Gottlieb wrote years later in an essay for her family, with the thought that we would free ourselves from all our material things that might stand in the way of making unimpeded choices. We sold everything: house, land, cars, goats, and chickens. The children took what they wanted, and we booked ourselves into a freighter, leaving from San Francisco and heading for Perth, Australia. The trip continued, sometimes on land, sometimes by sea, and sometimes by air, for 2 years. We were in Africa, Australia, and India, and in many places in between. We were just following our noses, getting volunteer jobs wherever we were and spreading as long as we wanted. In India, the couple volunteered to work at a hospital in the northern state of Uttar Pradesh, where lepers and other severely afflicted patients were treated. Margaret, who had been born and brought up in a mission station in Uttar Pradesh, did not adjust well. Her feelings for India were deeply conflicted. After a few months, she fell ill. I never wanted to go back to India, she wrote in a letter home. I had never seen any nostalgia for it and always felt that it was such a hopeless place. And Sid and I went back to India, and I was there working in a mission hospital for 3 months. And I got sick. I just couldn't stand it, the whole thing. I found that in the 40 years since I had left, nothing had changed, nothing. Village life in the same, the dirt, the monkeys, the stray dogs, the filth, the open gutters, the people defecating and peeing wherever they happen to be, the bribery, the total contrariness of everything. Nothing makes sense to us. All the years that the British and the missionaries had spent had made no difference at all, okay? I accept that, and now I know it. So it seems to me that they are the people who have a way, their way, which indeed has been in use and functioning for them a great deal longer than our way has been functioning for us. And they need to be left out or do it their way. While Margaret Gottlieb was convalescing and musing about the effects of imperialism in India, her husband became the subject of unwanted attention back home. They had been on the road for 2 extraordinary years. Suddenly, the past came calling. Scandals were raining down on the CIA. The Rockefeller Commission's mild report did not satisfy critics. Determined to dig deeper, the Senate formed a select committee to study the governmental operations with respect to intelligence activities, headed by Senator Frank Church of Idaho. The investigators found several documents mentioning plots to assassinate foreign leaders. The names of most CIA officers who spent or received these documents were redacted. One name, however, appeared several times: Sidney Gottlieb. Church committee investigators asked the CIA for permission to interview the mysterious officer. They were told that he had retired and left the United States. The investigators instead, finally with help from the CIA's legal office, they found him. Gottlieb was in India when, on the spring day of 75, he received a most discerning message. The church committee wanted to talk to him. His world travels were over. We're going to end here and continue on to another day. Think there's any truth here in what I'm saying? Please like and subscribe, and have a nice day. Thank you.